August 14th, 2005, a strange and terrifying guest was circling the sky above Athens, the capital of Greece. A passenger plane about 10,000 meters above the ground was absolutely silent, just flying around without making contact with anyone. The terrifying thing about this was that for the last 2 hours, this plane had not been responding to any messages from any control tower. Fear had spread throughout the atmosphere of Athens. Was this preparation for a terrorist attack or a hijacking event? Because of this fear, the Greek Air Force immediately dispatched its fighter jets after it. When the fighter jets approached the plane, a sight that would make one lose consciousness was seen inside the plane. It was found that there was absolute silence inside the plane. No movement, no stirring. All the passengers were sitting lifelessly in their seats, and no one was present in the cockpit either. During this time, the F-16 pilot saw a person in the plane's cockpit who apparently did not look like a pilot. He was roaming here and there in the cockpit, as if he was looking for something or trying to understand something. The very next moment, the plane suddenly tilted to one side and started descending rapidly towards the ground. After a few minutes, it crashed into the mountains north of Athens. 121 passengers and crew members were all killed in this accident. But what was this whole matter finally? Why was there no movement inside the plane? Why were the pilots and crew members not responding to any calls? And what happened inside after takeoff that later became the cause of a horrifying accident? This is the story of Helios Flight 52, which is also remembered as the Ghost Plane. Spectators, on the morning of August 14th, 2005, 115 passengers and 6 crew members boarded Helios Flight 52 at Larnaca Airport in Cyprus. Their destination was Prague, the city of the Czech Republic. But on the way, they had to make a stopover in Athens. It was summertime, and most of the people had left Cyprus for holidays who were going to land in Athens. The captain of this flight was a highly experienced person. At the age of 59, he had more than 17,000 hours of flying experience. The first officer was also 51 years old, and he had also spent 7,500 hours in the air. Usually in such accidents, emphasis is placed on the expertise of the crew. But in this case, the story was a little different. These 2 pilots had been together on many flights before, and the first officer had often complained to his friends and family about the captain's pressure and strict demeanor. The airline was also aware of this issue beforehand. Not only this, but it was also revealed in the first officer's training record that he had trouble with the checklist procedure. This was one thing that was going to prove to be the most important later on. The plane was a 7-year-old Boeing 737-300. In the cool morning air, the aircraft took off from Larnaca Airport without any issues. As soon as the plane went above 10,000 feet, the crew contacted Nicosia Air Traffic Control, and the captain asked for permission to fly at an altitude of 34,000 feet, which he also received. But as soon as the aircraft reached an altitude of 12,000 feet, an alarm suddenly started ringing in the cockpit. This alarm was the same one that used to ring on the ground before takeoff, when there is a problem with the aircraft's takeoff configuration. Because of this, both pilots were surprised why they were hearing it in the air. After 90 seconds, the captain contacted his airline's operations center and told them about the takeoff configuration warning. He also said that the ventilation cooling fan's lights were off, and further asked where its circuit breakers were located. The engineer on the ground replied that those lights should be off anyway, and that circuit breaker is located behind the captain's seat. When the engineer asked the captain to confirm the issue, the captain said that they were not off. The pilot's reply did not make any sense to the engineer. Meanwhile, the engineer remembered one thing. Before the flight, the same engineer had inspected the aircraft's pressurization system. Because the controls of this system were close to the controls about which the captain was giving confused answers. Because of this, the engineer asked the captain whether the pressurization mode was on auto or manual. But instead of answering this, the captain repeated the same question again. Where are the circuit breakers located? During this conversation, the passengers' oxygen masks inside the plane had fallen down. Shortly after this, Helios ground operations lost contact with the plane. Before they knew it, the aircraft reached 34,000 feet, and all attempts to contact it now seemed unsuccessful. Now Helios operations contacted Nicosia Air Traffic Control and asked them to try to contact Flight 52. For the next 5 minutes, the controller tried to contact the aircraft, but received no reply. Then the controller contacted another aircraft near Flight 52 and asked them to try to contact Flight 52, but this method was also unsuccessful. Meanwhile, Flight 52 had now entered Greek airspace without permission and continued its flight plan. Nicosia Air Traffic Control Tower also tried to contact Flight 52 on the emergency frequency, but no reply came from here either. Then they contacted Athens ATC in Greece and asked if they had made contact with Flight 52 or not. But unfortunately, there was no reply from the aircraft to their radio calls either. Now there were two possibilities here. Either Flight 52 had a radio transmission issue due to which they could hear the calls, but their replies were not being transmitted, or both pilots have been taken hostage. Keeping the first possibility in mind, the Athens control tower gave permission for the aircraft to descend, but there was no sign of descending from Flight 52. Despite contacting more than 20 times when no reply came, Athens ATC was compelled to contact the Greek Air Force and told them that Flight 52 had entered the airspace without permission and messages were not being replied to. The Greek Air Force immediately sent 2 F-16 jets for interception. At this time, Flight 52 was perfectly following its flight path on autopilot. The point where it had to descend had already been missed 2 times, but the aircraft was flying at 34,000 feet. At 7:37 a.m., Flight 52 established a holding pattern over Athens Airport. A holding pattern is called the pattern in which the aircraft is circling over the airport, and as soon as permission is received, it makes a landing approach. When they were on the 6th round of the holding pattern, both F-16s intercepted them. It was exactly 8:30 in the morning. One pilot out of the 2 F-16s gave a very surprising report. He said that the captain's seat in the cockpit of Flight 52 was empty. He also looked inside the passenger cabin. He could see the cabin clearly in the light of the windows on the other side. The passengers were sitting motionless in their seats there, while oxygen masks were on their faces. When the aircraft was completing its 10th round of the holding pattern, one of the F-16 pilots saw a strange sight. A person wearing a light blue shirt and a black vest entered the cockpit and sat on the captain's seat. He wore headphones and placed his hands on the panel in front of him. The pilots gestured with their hands to the person in the cockpit, to which he also responded by waving his hand. But within a few moments, the aircraft's left engine shut down, after which the plane rapidly tilted to the left and started descending towards the ground. A little before 9 a.m., the aircraft turned further to the left, and after that, its right engine also shut down. Approximately 4 minutes later, it crashed into the hills in the northwest of Athens and was destroyed. Immediately after the accident, investigators got to work. They examined the wreckage and also interrogated the engineer who had done maintenance work on the plane before the accident. The night before the accident, the same engineer had conducted a pressurization leak test on the aircraft. During this test, he had moved the pressurization mode located on the overhead panel from auto to the manual position. But after finishing the work, he forgot to put the switch back to auto. The aircraft was flying at an altitude of 34,000 feet. And due to the manual position, the air pressure inside it started to decrease. The human brain can work for only 10 minutes in low pressure, and this condition is called hypoxia. That is lack of oxygen. Its first effect is on the brain, which can lead to confusion, reduced thinking ability, and finally unconsciousness or death. Both pilots had to check this switch in their pre-flight duties, but they did not notice. Because normally that switch is only in the auto position, they also had 2 more opportunities to identify the problem, before taxiing and after takeoff, but they missed every opportunity. When the aircraft went above 12,000 feet, the cabin altitude warning alarm started ringing, but the pilot's attention went towards the takeoff configuration warning instead of the pressurization system. In this misunderstanding, they started the procedure that is usually done on the runway before takeoff, and thus they completely ignored the real problem. Meanwhile, oxygen masks deployed in the aircraft and the pass-oxy-on light lit up. But due to the initial effects of hypoxia, they probably didn't pay attention to this either. This was the time when the captain and first officer became unconscious, and after the 10-minute oxygen supply ended, the passengers and crew also lost consciousness. Now the question arises, who was the person in the cockpit who arrived there 2 hours after they became unconscious? Investigations revealed that he was flight attendant Andreas Prodromou, who had a commercial pilot license but was not qualified to fly a 737. The cockpit voice recorder revealed that Prodromou had also tried to make Mayday calls after the engines failed, but he accidentally forgot to press the transmit button. The investigation board determined that his flying expertise was not enough to control a Boeing 737. That too when the engines had failed due to running out of fuel. And even if he somehow managed to land the aircraft, the survival of the passengers and crew was impossible, because prolonged hypoxia causes irreversible damage to the brain. During the investigation, 3 out of the 4 portable oxygen cylinders from the wreckage of the aircraft were found in a used condition. This proved that Prodromou and perhaps 2 more cabin crew members had used these cylinders, due to which they remained conscious for a longer time compared to the rest of the passengers and pilots. After the Helios Flight 52 accident, the aviation industry learned a lot, and many new SOPs were also created in which Boeing was advised to increase pilot training and understand the difference between warnings. After implementing these SOPs, an accident like Helios Flight 52 has not happened again to this day. We hope you all will definitely like and share this video.